Sorry you had to wait.
That's all right.
Moving on to presentation regarding TCEQ enforcement actions by Freeze and Nichols. You guys want to go ahead and
Sure.
start the presentation?
My name is Nicole Rutigliano with Freeze and Nichols, and this is John Rutledge. He's also with Freeze and Nichols. And, we're going to go through what we've been doing regarding the lake. I think a lot of people are familiar with how what's happened to this point, but TCEQ came out in May for a compliance investigation, and a couple things came out of that. That spurred a TCEQ dam safety inspection, and a follow-up letter from TCEQ with the finding that Elkins Lake is indeed impounded by a dam, which makes it subject to TCEQ criteria. That led to a notice of enforcement action, and that's when we came on board to begin our analysis of the structure. So Freeze and Nichols came out in September, and we had a site visit, and Ed took us around and showed us different parts of the dam, and we took a lot of pictures and looked at a lot of different things, and the main purpose of this site visit was to confirm, yes, we think the structure does qualify as a dam according to TCEQ, which we did agree with TCEQ's findings that it is a dam. But I'm going to go a little bit into why is it a dam. So we know this is, it was excavated a couple decades ago, sand and gravel mining, and a lot of what would be considered embankment was existing material. But in order to impound water and keep the stream from flowing through, some fill had to have been placed at some point. So what we look at from an engineering standpoint is the height of the dam and the maximum storage capacity of the dam. And in order to be regulated by TCEQ, a dam has to be greater than 6 feet and have a maximum storage of greater than 50 acre feet. So this figure shows you, it's a real generic figure, but essentially the crust of the dam has an elevation of 566 feet MSL. The downstream toe elevation, which is how TCEQ measures the height of the dam, is from the crest to the downstream toe. And the downstream toe is pretty much where there's that creek that runs downstream of the structure, and it's the lowest elevation at that point. So that elevation is approximately 546 feet MSL, which results in a dam height of 20 feet, which is greater than the 6 foot minimum dam height. And we also estimated the storage, and it's an estimate of the storage, but it's approximately 138 acre feet at the top of dam elevation. So based on the height and the storage together, it's classified as a small size dam according to TCEQ.
What did you say the minimum was? 6 feet?
6 feet.
6 feet.
In height, yes.
Okay.
So now that we've established, yes, it is a dam, the next component of the analysis is to look at the hazard classification of a dam. The whole purpose behind all of the dam safety criteria is the protection of downstream residents. If you're impounding water, there's the potential that your dam is going to fail at some point, even though it may never. The potential exists, and you are putting downstream residents, roads, facilities at risk. So TCEQ very clearly defines a high hazard dam as one that, if it were to fail, it would result in the loss of 7 or more lives, and that they consider that to be the equivalent of 3 or more habitable structures. And that would be impacted structures downstream if the dam were to fail. So just from looking at the dam before we even did the breach analysis, which I'll get into in the next slide, there's an apartment complex directly downstream of the dam. You're going to affect a lot of people, and definitely more than 7 lives if the dam were to fail when it was full. So so we know that it's a high hazard dam, it's existing, it's small. TCEQ's requirement is that it passes 75% of what's called the probable maximum flood. And this is a theoretical flood event developed by TCEQ, and it essentially looks at the most severe precipitation conditions that you could have in conjunction with the most severe hydrologic conditions. So saturated soils, you're not going to have any infiltration, you're assuming all of your precipitation essentially becomes runoff, and you're looking at really, really high precipitations based on a statistical analysis of historical precipitations in the area.
Carl, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
This problem of maximum flood, we've all, a lot of us have heard of kind of a 100-year flood.
Right.
So can you kind of give us what it is relative to a 100-year flood?
This is greater than a 500-year flood event. So, I mean, sometimes we say it's on the order of magnitude of 1,000 years.
I would say, I tried to divorce it from being statistical because it's a theoretical upper limit that it would not be physically reasonably possible to have a flood bigger than this. That's the theory behind it. Yeah.
It's a lot more than a 100-year flood.
Yes.
Much more. It's
Much
really
more.
off the statistical charts. And
So it's, I mean,
Yes.
show us.
yeah.
So, did y'all look at whether this would pass a 100?
We did look, it will pass the 100. No, it does overtop during the 100-year flood event. Yes. It does not pass the 100-year.
What doesn't pass?
The data.
Existing structure?
The existing structure, yes. Yes. So it's required to pass the 75% of the PMF, or the probable maximum flood. And it also has to have a breach analysis, an emergency action plan, an operation and maintenance plan, and a regular inspection program. And these are just the typical requirements of TCEQ based on a dam of this size and hazard classification. And I'll go through, we've done some of these. We're working through some of these items and reports, so I'll go through what we've actually done and what's still left to do. But the first thing that we need to look at are the results of the probable maximum flood. So, based on the current spillway capacity and the current storage in the lake and the 75% PMF, you're looking at your dam overtopping by almost 5 feet during the 75% PMF event. This, in TCEQ's eyes, makes the dam hydraulically inadequate. It has to be modified in some way. You either have to modify spillway capacity, height of the dam. It has to be modified so that it does not overtop during the 75% PMF event.
Can I ask a question?
No, we're gonna hold off on those. I'm gonna wait.
I'm
and
just
ask
trying to
you-
get an explanation of what, I'm sorry.
What do you need explanation of?
I thought we were talking about a failure of the dam, but now what I'm hearing is we're talking about an overtopping of the dam. Is that right?
So, let me,
Well, our first presentation, but I think she might address it.
Maybe, yeah, she probably will.
But
That's
but
okay.
I'll definitely come back to it if I don't answer your question.
Okay.
So currently the dam passes 21% of the PMF. And this PMF analysis is the first step in the analysis that we have to do. That determines whether or not your dam is considered hydraulically adequate. Yours is not. It is overtopped by 5 feet during the required 75% PMF. Then we move on to the breach analysis. And what the breach analysis is it's a flood routing analysis downstream of the dam based on outflows from the dam if it were to fail. So if your dam is full, your lake is full, and you have some kind of event, either a piping or an overtopping event, and you lose your reservoir, these are the approximate extents of flooding that you would expect downstream. And the whole purpose of developing these is, one, to confirm or identify the hazard classification, but also to identify areas that would need to be evacuated if you were concerned that your dam was about to fail. It's really a safety thing for residents and structures downstream. So the breach analysis did confirm in this case that the high hazard classification is appropriate. There are about, I think I estimated like 40 apartment units that would be within the inundation limits, and that's significantly greater than the 3 habitable structures that have to be impacted. So our high hazard classification is appropriate. Those really are the only impacts downstream of the dam. Spanish Trail is also impacted, but what throws the dam into the high hazard classification is the apartment complex. So we've developed this breach analysis, we've got the inundation limits, and all of that goes into what's called an emergency action plan. So the purpose of the emergency action plan is, one, to identify situations that could threaten the dam and provide some steps that could be taken. A lot of times you're calling your engineer, but there are some things that you can be doing in the meantime to try and prevent or delay failure of your dam or prevent the situation from getting worse. But really the primary focus of the emergency action plan is to identify who do we need to notify if we think our dam's about to fail, if we're concerned about a situation, if it's eroding and we're seeing a large, there's flow through the dam and we're seeing material moving. Who do we need to get notified so that we can get people evacuated downstream? So saving lives, protecting lives is the primary function of the emergency action plan. And this is just a little screenshot of the notification flow chart. It essentially runs through who within the city is responsible for initiating and implementing the emergency action plan, and then who else within. There's a whole protocol of people to be contacted within the state to expedite evacuations and prevent as much damage as possible. So a third requirement is that an operation and maintenance manual be developed for the dam. And this is a pretty straightforward document. It just has typical maintenance procedures that need to be accomplished, just good care so that you're maintaining your dam in the best condition possible. If your dam's in good condition, it's easier to see problems coming, and you're hopefully going to avoid or prevent some issues that are actually preventable. Some are not, but some are just based on good maintenance. It contains inspection tables and inspection checklists, and it's pretty comprehensive of what you would need to look for in the dam, issues to look for. So those are the dam safety items. Another thing that we looked at when we went on our site visit in September was the gas well. And I know there's concern about the well pad having caused damage to the structure of the embankment. And all the drilling that has already happened, it had happened before our site visit. There was no monitoring program in place. We don't have any data like vibration data or survey data to look at before and after the drilling. But based on what we saw in the field in September when we made our site visit, there's no visual indication that they've compromised the integrity of the embankment. We would look for things like cracking or excessive seepage or bulging or just misalignment of the dam, any kind of indication of movement of the dam, basically. And there was nothing to indicate to us that they had caused any damage to the structural integrity of the embankment. Now, there's no way to say 100% that they did not, but nothing indicated that they have. And we do feel like if there's going to be future drilling or future hydraulic fracturing, that a monitoring program would be appropriate to monitor vibrations on the surface of the dam and to potentially survey the crust of the dam before and after to see if we've had any movement caused by the drilling or fracking.
See, there's no visible cause now, but there was never inspection before drilling took place.
We're going to hold off on, just let them finish the presentation, just make a note, and I'll
So where are we now? We've submitted a draft breach analysis report, a drilling impacts memo, a draft emergency action plan, and operation and maintenance manual, and all those are with the city awaiting comments. And once we get those comments, we'll finalize, well, they'll be drafts still, but we will incorporate the comments and submit them to TCEQ for review. They typically have some comments that we need to incorporate before all the reports are finalized, but at that point, the reports are pretty close to being done, and we've met several of our requirements that have come out of this enforcement. We've met a lot of our dam safety requirements. One of the issues that's really kind of the primary issue is that the dam is currently hydraulically inadequate. There's going to have to be modifications made to the dam. I said earlier, either it depends on the dam, it depends on the situation. In this case, you could there's a range of options you could look at, and conceptually you're looking at between $400,000 and $700,000 to modify your dam so that it's hydraulically adequate. Now, these are very conceptual level, high level. We have not dug into any of the individual alternatives. And hopefully if we move to that point, the numbers will be better refined. But ballpark, that's what you're looking at to modify the dam so that it's in compliance. We would still need additional geotechnical information, some survey information, and we're not clear on potential cost sharing with XTO. I'm not sure how that issue would be handled at all. But that's the cost that you're looking at. And that's really where we are now.
Okay. Council, you guys have any questions or anything you guys want to direct towards anything at this time? Anybody? Okay, I got a couple of things I'm going to address, and then the other monitoring programs, have you seen any other damages that have been done from drilling sites to dams?
In our experience, no, we've not seen any.
Have there been any in this area that have been done?
You mean in this area that have been monitored?
Yes.
Yes, we've been involved in a handful, not very many, just a few, but generally when drilling's going on, they know there's a dam, they tend to avoid it. But when there has been drilling close to a dam, we have a couple, or even a levee in one case, we've not seen enough impact from that to have any impact on the dam.
Okay. One of the things that I noted, it's been brought up before by some of our citizen groups or citizens, seepage. Did you notice seepage that were coming through the structure itself that would be, I didn't see any noting there of damage or potential seepage that is breaking the dam?
During our site visit, we did not see any seepage on the downstream slope. There's a lot of trees. We didn't dig through every square inch, but nothing jumped out at us when we were.
I'll add one point that when you're talking about seepage, when we refer to seepage, we're looking at, our concern is the water moving from the lake through the embankment. That's the concern. And a lot of times it's difficult to tell because obviously we're dealing with the creek and there may be water down there. That doesn't mean seepage. And so if the drainage may not be all that great, you got a creek down there, there's often water there. The water doesn't mean seepage. We didn't see any evidence that there was active
Do you
seepage.
think the structure that we have there right now is at least holding?
Based on our visual, the structure's in good shape.
Okay. The other thing was the cost that you just showed back there, the unknown. Were those included in that estimate, ballparkish, or is it just a big range?
The ballpark estimate was construction costs only.
Okay.
It did have some contingencies.
It does have, yes.
And I know there's a lot of people here that probably have questions, so I'm going to go ahead and let you guys, I'm going to try to limit this somewhat. This is supposed to be a presentation, so if you'll raise your hand, I'll direct your questions and I'll see what we can answer or what we can do with it. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So,
Name and address, please.
Greg Hudson, 2617 Clover Lane. So what you just presented tonight, if that wasn't even there, we still have this problem?
If what weren't even there.
The well site, the pad and everything, if that was just an earthen dam over there, we'd still find ourselves in this situation that you just presented?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the answer to that is, in theory, yes. The only reason that we're in the situation we are right now, and maybe you can address this, we had no enforcement action or anything else from TCEQ until they were directed towards us by a group. And once that came in there, it came into play. TCEQ doesn't come out and look for these situations, and what the structure that we had there that was dug out, more than likely, we probably never would have, but because of the situation now, we've got to figure out what to do with the structure that we currently have and how to either keep it or just, that's going to be the next option of, really what are the potentials here and what's the real cost structure and how do we handle that cost structure on fixing, with TCEQ and the enforcement action. Am I missing something on that legally, or is that really kind of
No, the agency has to respond to any complaint that's filed. And when they do that, particularly given the drought, they pay a significant attention to lakes to know whether they are, they were out for something else. The lake, whether it doesn't have a permit, so then that drove the dam safety evaluation.
Jake,
Yeah, who's next, Dan?
Jake Cooley, 3016 California Lane.
Yes.
In a follow-up question to Mayor Tetters about the seepage. Wouldn't vegetation be a sign of possible seepage? Dead vegetation or surrounding
I don't know.
the well site?
Vegetation is absolutely a sign of seepage, but the presence of vegetation doesn't it doesn't indicate seepage. Seepage can cause vegetation, obviously, and the trees have been on the dam for a long time, and they're not there just because there's seepage. It's, you're right that the vegetation can indicate seepage.
I mean, a lot of time, we're only into 3 years in this thing, so I mean, that's not a very long time for a tree.
I'll add to that because, well, obviously, a lot of the vegetation's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
But when you say vegetation is indicative of seepage, from experience side, we can tell if that there's a area that has excessive seepage or there's vegetation that's different when it's fully saturated, always saturated, that looks different than your normal grasses, trees that we've got either on an embankment or on a
The
hillside. or
vegetation's been there
that's
forever,
normal.
it's the same vegetation that's been growing probably for 50 years.
Yes,
100 years.
that they tend to look different, but sometimes if it's real heavy, there might be some seepage down there that we can't, just because we can't physically get to it or see it. That's a potential. But there wasn't any signs of seepage or the vegetation that might indicate a seepage area.
Good?
Cindy Newman, 3304 Elkins Drive. Would you mind going back to the gas well effects slide? I have a question. When, if you look at the dirt, the lake before STL came to the site, this road right here was actually a dirt road that was an earthen road, and that was actually the dam. Spillway, spillway. When XTO decided that that road could not support their trucks, what they did was they came in and instead of just going over the dirt road that was there, which was the spillway, they took out 5 feet and put those culverts in. So they dug through the earthen dam spillway. When they did that, they lowered the lake 4 to 5 feet from the survey bed. The possibility of what the lake was to what the lake is now is 5 feet lower than it was because of that spillway. So, did you look into that? XTO altered the earthen spillway by putting culverts in, huge culverts, 3,
Yes, here.
6, I'm sorry.
I'll address the question. So, I think the effect of where we're at with this has no impact of what they did or did not do. The enforcement action of having the water and having a dam period, whether or not they lowered that, actually would have a lower effect on really what the enforcement action would be is if the water level was lower than what it is. Because of the amount of water that is held in there, even if you raise that spillway, you still have to come up with a fix for the entire, what you want to consider dam, because of TCEQ coming in.
We know that.
That being lower, it does not affect.
That's the point she's making.
What's the point you're making?
The point she's making
Wait,
is the lake
can she
cannot
not speak
hold.
herself?
Sure.
What's the point you're making?
The point I'm making
You're not
is
hearing.
the lake cannot hold what it did because of alteration made to the earthen embankment and the spillway when they put those culverts in. And by the lease for XTO, they are responsible financially for all the altercations that need to be fixed at that pad site. The city is not financially responsible with Castleberry. And so that helps us in this endeavor as well, because XTO has a fiduciary responsibility there. That's my point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to get back to the question I tried to ask a minute ago.
Yes.
Is the cost of the remediation of the dam, is it raising it the 5 feet that it needs to, as I understood your presentation, it needs to be raised about 5 feet to keep the overflowing downstream? Is that what the real cost is?
We don't know the specific cost. There's alternatives. Their recommendation is either to raise dirt or to come up with some type of structure to raise it that amount on the dam side, or to come up with an alternative on the downhill side, either remove all the trees on the back side of it and come up with something and make that entirely concrete on the back of it to enforce that any overflow would not impact the dam itself. So you've got a couple of different options that are going to be coming up that we don't have analysis on, which is either building a wall, enforcing it in order to hold water back on the back side of the property, moving every tree back there and everything that's back there and basically making it solid concrete, coming over in order to leave it where it is on the front side.
I don't understand that. Why would you have to have, okay, I'm sorry, it's because I'm stupid.
Well, no. You're in the same boat that we are. Of these options, what there is to do with this is something that's very technical. It's not a simple, we can just go out there and change the spillway and fix the water right there and everything's good. This is a matter of going back through and making this thing meet regulations and doing a lot of things that, are either going to be very not pleasing to the eye, that you're going to have a wall structure up there now that really goes up to the height of the wall that's on the XTO pad site, and make that a retaining wall that holds back water. Not a visual, but a physical structure that's going to hold back water from being able to go downstream. Or fixing it so that downstream effect, if it did have water flow over it, if it breached it, that there would be no erosion on the back side of it, so that the structure itself would stay. So you've got a compound problem here of figuring out how to do that.
Is that what you were talking about when you were talking about overtopping? Is that the danger that the
That's-
dam will breach
That's
from
the danger.
overtopping?
You get overtopping, and once you have overtopping, the downstream goes against the road and it eats back into the embankment.
Okay, now,
And this would be that way whether the pad site was there or not, regardless of the pad site.
And-
Pad site has nothing to do with the effects of this.
okay, and it would be there regardless of whether the TCEQ found out about it, right? What would be that danger there?
There's that
The very danger they're trying
liability,
to
yes.
protect us against, correct? Okay.
Mr. Noonan,
Thank you, this is a very good presentation. Oh, sorry. Pat Noonan, 3304 Elkins Drive. I've sat through a lot of presentations before. This one was really very well done. Very clear. So my question was to you, sir. Had you checked any pad sites before where there was actually drilling through a dam, an earthen dam, not near one, but actually through the dam to have any sort of gauge?
The examples we've had
Yeah.
were not through the embankment itself.
Okay, they were like-
they were in the immediate vicinity.
Okay.
And we were monitoring the level of vibration at the dam while the drilling or the fracking was going on,
Okay.
and those were minimal.
Okay, because I know there's been stuff in the press about Joe Pool and some other areas where they've stopped fracking because of issues around the dam. I was just curious. The two other comments, and I'll sit down. What Cindy was trying to address, and I don't think the point got made or was understood. We've wondered about how much water the lake can hold, because we've lived there 20 years. We know what the full lake looks like. We still remember. And the defining feature of the full lake is on the northern shore, there's a peninsula. And when the lake is full, you can't see the peninsula. On the west side, or the south side of the lake, we have the wooden deck. And we also have some place where our kids, etch their name. When the lake is full, we know exactly where those markings are. We know where the deck is. It goes almost up to the top of the deck. So we had some elevations done because we were curious about the spillway. If we ever got water back in the lake again, will it hold what it used to? So just to share this, the top of the peninsula, the highest point of peninsula elevation is right at 563. It's 563.97. And the measure point on the south side of the shore is 564.39. So somewhere between 564 and 563-ish is where the full level of the lake was. XTO's culverts at the bottom The lowest one, and they built their culverts to spec, by the way. If you look at their permit application, they've got elevations of their spillway or the culverts under the road, and they actually built those to spec. And the range is from 560.15 to 562.74. The low point is 560.15. So I think we've lost some water holding capability of the lake through that modification. And yeah, and I just and if you visually, if you stand on the wooden deck and you go down to 560 elevation, it's 26 feet down the embankment.
So I
Please look at, I just want everybody to be aware as we look at options, if there's a way to get the water holding level back, that would be great.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at, Mr. Nunez.
Just wanted to bring that point up. Thank you.
We're trying to figure out if we fix this, what level we need to fix it at and how we maintain that level.
Yep.
Because in addition to that, there's going to be other actions. You know, how do we supply the water? How do we take care of it? There's a lot of additional things that come into play. And we've got to figure out, you know, how do we do that and what's the cost to the city and or citizens really of trying to keep that at a level, and is it worth it, and how do we do it? So those are the things that the council, you know, and legally we have to figure out what we can and can't do and how that's going to be fixed. Any other questions? Mr. Flowers.
Steve Flowers, 3306 Eden Court. I would like to point out that the water level, as far as the dam seeping, was done in September, if I've heard the program correctly,
That's when we
of this year, 2014, when the lake was probably at its lowest level after summer. I believe, Mayor, if you go back to one of the TCEQ level letters, one of the things that they specified, you wouldn't get an accurate gauge on the seepage until the level came up, which it has not.
The seepage issue, regardless of what was or wasn't, they didn't see any at this point. What we have to do...
I want to point out they didn't see any at this point because the lake was that low. It's a little bit of a deceiving thing for the citizens. Because that lake was that low, there was no possibility of seepage. I was over there in May and I shot my pictures.
Right, so I'm
And
saying
the
there was
TC
seepage. Let's say there is seepage. There's tons of seepage. The problem is...
Let's not relax on the seepage, is my point there.
The seepage
And-
makes no difference because we have to come up with a way to fix the structure so that if there is or isn't any of that, that we...
Couldn't agree with you more, but if there is seepage, you have to do the armoring. And that should be XTO's responsibility. If that was caused by the drilling, all right, they should be doing the armoring. Is that...
If we can
Right.
legally figure out...
Now.
Mr. Jeffries, I don't know if there's been a way to address that. If they're saying there's a legal situation where they can... These engineers would have to do something, I guess, to prove
Well, if they can prove that the drilling caused the seepage
Is there any
to
way...
exceed.
I mean, is there...
It is a very broad definition. Very broad.
In theory...
I'm going to say, in theory, maybe, but...
But the structure of what we had there, even prior to this, if the pad site wasn't there, we'd still be in the exact same situation we are right now because of the enforcement action. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I mean, so regardless of what they've done, and in theory, they've added to the pad site, so to me that would increase it. So
Can I
I'm not
finish
sure.
with my
We'll figure
question?
it out later. Go ahead.
All right, one other question I want to point out. The TCEQ was out here in 2009, Mayor, once here for the drilling permit. All right? They were out here with their engineers, and they were out here.
Look at the same photo I have.
This is from the drilling permit. It's actually a 2007 shot by Jacobs, who was Carter and Burgess back then. They came out here 2009, and they came out here again when you allowed them to draw water out. And if you remember one of the council meetings, we had a big dispute. They called it a reservoir. All right? You're putting in a certain way, you're putting the blame of the discovery that this was a dam on a restoration group that didn't know anything about a dam until one of the newer employees of TCEQ came out here, and she made the discovery within 20 minutes, like, hey, it's more than 6 feet, just the same criteria that you presented to us. Now, what are their responsibilities prior to the drilling of discovering that this was a dam at that time? You look at all the aerials, now hindsight's 2020, looking in the rearview mirror as much as I've learned about dams. When you look at all these old sites, you can't tell that's a dam. I mean, to the average guy, but back then you had the citizen.
The TCEQ basically, they should have said something.
I would agree with you. They should have had the professionalism to say, just so you know.
I'm going to respond to that. I happened to be there when TCEQ came out. And they came out for the express purpose to respond to a complaint that we were illegally impounding water. I was there when the inspectors came. They said, his exact words to me were, no, you don't have a problem over here with this rock, but you do have a problem over here because you're impounding water over here. That was the reason they came out. That was the reason their purpose was to look at our being charged with illegally impounding water. That's how this came about.
Sooner or later, sir, it would have happened. And I'm saying the sooner should have been at least 2009, if not 1972. If we really want to go to it. But the focus on this entire deal came when the drilling permit.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment. From my perspective, listening to all this, it doesn't matter. We were not in compliance, okay? And you guys don't want us to be out of compliance, so how it got found out doesn't matter. What matters is that we are in compliance.
It's how we decide to spend, or if the citizens maybe even decide to spend. We got to figure out the alternatives in order to make this either a structure that is appropriate or not a structure anymore that is appropriate. And that's going to be the question of how it's handled and what we do. We don't have a full analysis yet. This is a presentation of what TCEQ basically has said. They've come out and said, yes, in their opinion now, it really is a dam. We were hoping it wasn't, therefore we could avoid some of this additional expense, basically, for our city. But this is going to be a huge impact to the city, of what we do and how we do it. Your other options, you could breach the dam. You could not have a dam anymore and not have that structure. And so there's a lot of different alternatives. Or you have to build something to maintain that the right way. And is that aesthetically something that now you have a pad site sitting there that we level every tree that's around it and make it all concrete in order to do that because of the spillway being breached, or if water overflows it, that you have to keep the structure of what you're calling a dam from having any deterioration or erosion, if in theory the 75% chance of the 500-year plus flood were to happen. Well, we've got to do that to meet those requirements should we go down that path. And that's really what this presentation is, to let you know, hey, we've got an issue here and we've got to figure out how to resolve it and figure out what we spend money on, or how we spend the money, or what we do in order to alleviate the enforcement action with TCEQ.
A few minutes ago, there are a number of different options that apparently are available. What I thought was the only option when I first heard this was just to bring in 5 feet more dirt and to stack it up. That's how,
Yeah,
I just gave you my engineering skills.
Unfortunately, we wish that was the simplest solution. Part of it could be backfilling the lake in order to do that.
What I was getting at
is
you're going to come up with options for us and make recommendations on. I mean, you're going to. is someone gonna recommend options to us, and what's the
They are gonna come
timeline
up
on
with
that?
recommendations and options for us to be able to alleviate the issues that we have and get in compliance one way or another.
But
And no-
before we do all that, we have to get a permit to impound water, because if we can't get a permit to impound water, we can't do any of it.
Yeah.
In other words,
So downstream Dallas
TCEQ
says,
wanted to breach the dam. That's what their demand was of us, to breach the dam. And I believe Mr.
So-
Gassenberg got them to not require us to breach the dam at this time, so they're allowing us to illegally impound water.
we still may have to breach the dam regardless.
So, I mean, is there gonna be a problem with obtaining the permit?
Well, I hope not, but
Legally, give me the answer to that. I mean, go ahead. I know there's options. And the chances of getting downstream, which is Dallas, they give nobody upstream permits to impound water? Is that,
The TCQ issues permits. They're built to issue permits. As long as you meet the administrative and technical requirements, they'll issue your permit.
And those would be the requirements she set out for us here, right?
State water.
This is related to impounding state water. That is, otherwise has been appropriated to the city of Arlington or you just have to meet the requirements, and you may have someone contest your application because they think there's an impact to their downstream senior water right, but if you meet the requirements, the agency is built to issue permits.
other option is to go get from a downstream somebody to give us permit or rights to part of that? Is that?
It's an upstream contract
An upstream.
that would meet the requirement to demonstrate appropriated water.
So-
It's a piece of the, you've got to get your own permit.
Right, but we have to get the water rights because it's state water from somebody else that owns those.
You have to find unappropriated water some way, from either an existing water rights holder or an alternate source.
Well, this isn't in Arlington's,
Yeah.
watershed. They're
This is in which
downstream,
watershed?
they're not upstream. I mean,
Which
they're not
watershed are we
downstream,
in?
I'm just,
Arlington on both sides.
Yeah, they're down.
no, I'm talking about Waco.
We're down, we potentially are downstream
I do.
because of the elevations, it just depends.
I need to look at a map. I don't know off the top of my head.
That's on the Russian Village Creek.
Well, it's not technically where the water actually is, it's how it's shaped. So in theory, if
Let's go run
that
into
elevation's
some-
higher, we could get something from it in order to.
Just go to run into some creek.
I don't understand your question.
It doesn't pertain directly to the watershed coming into this creek. It could be watershed from a bigger area that flows that we could offset. Is that right or no?
That's more of a Brad question.
Downstream water rights holder is willing to subordinate all or a portion of the water rights within the watershed to you guys that liquefied water to meet the requirements to demonstrate unappropriated water for your permit. You can do that through an alternate source, groundwater, you can do it through treated effluent from a wastewater treatment plant. There's all kinds of ways to get things. The bottom line, that finding has to be made. There has to be some finding that there is water for this lake, because right now the basin is over.
And problem number two is that we have to keep the capacity at a certain level once we do get. That's not
Unless you have an upstream.
unless we have a contract. So in theory, when you're under a water restriction, as we are, we would have to be pumping water out of our wells to fill the pond to keep it at a level. While you can't water your yard, we have to water the pond. In theory.
I can't help but think, but let me ask this question first. Is the city even going to approach XTO about helping fund some of the cost of remediating this?
We got to figure out what the real issue is, and how we can demonstrate for them.
So here's what I'm thinking, because I always believe as far as this pendulum goes over here as it relates to the drought and no rain, it comes back this way. So maybe we hit that 70, that 100 or whatever. And maybe we have a breach, it wipes out some apartments, and guess what? There's multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Now the city's probably, I would hope, not going to say, well, you know what? We did a study before and we found out that XTO's not complicit in this. So, that kind of drives me as it relates to
Pocket syndrome, absolutely.
So I just want to.
Yeah, oh yeah, no. we've got to first address the TCEQ issue. It's not about how we fix it or who the money comes funding for it. We address, is that correct? We address the TCEQ thing first, and then we can
We have to
figure
get a
out.
permit first, that's.
And then we have to get a permit for the
Before we
water
do anything.
in order to figure out whether or not we even want to repair or impound the water in order to do that. I mean, so it's not like it's just a simple one-step process. First thing is we got to fight TCEQ, which we are in the process of doing. We're going to file that stuff for the enforcement action, which is to break the dam right now. We're fighting that. Then we have to figure out where we get the impounded water from.
Sorry about that.
And then once we do get impounded water, then we got to figure out how we keep a structure of a dam in order to keep that water that we've gotten a permit now to impound. So it's not just a quick little, hey, we can just fix the dam and we're done.
Can I correct you for a second?
Okay.
We're not fighting anything. We have to issue
Yeah.
an application for a permit.
Permit.
The permit's gonna be through a process. We can't do anything until we get the permit.
Yeah.
The permit's gonna probably take 18 months to 2 years, whatever it takes. It's gonna take a long time for them probably to do something.
Mayor,
Or the way you said, so,
unless
somebody may take 6 months or 3 months.
I'm gonna let Mr.
First question to the presentation that we have tonight. I'm ready to call the question.
Ms. Newman, go ahead.
Well, yeah,
One more question?
two things. We ran well water into the lake so XTO could take it out. We ran all our well
Mayor,
water
that's not
in there.
pertinent to what we're discussing tonight.
And yes, it is, because it was part of the permit of getting water into the lake. Of getting water, and the second one is, pertaining to the dam. There's 16 wells permitted right there now. Are we gonna let them drill the last 4 wells? That also has to do with the dam.
That has nothing to do with the dam. As far as the water and what they flowed in.
That's not true. He said that in the presentation, that if when they drill,
Mayor, that's not.
If they
Mayor, I
drill.
call the question.
he said it in the presentation, Ed.
I call the question.
Ms. Noonan, I'm going to address the water question. The water that was pumped from our well.
Correct.
So if
It's
somebody,
just a source.
I understand, but it was purchased. We didn't pay for that. If we had to pay for that, that's a really expensive
Okay,
process.
okay.
Go back and look at your review of how much you guys, when you did all your open records, how much it cost and what the financial impact of that is. I mean, that's a lot of money. Yes, we have to figure out how to get it here. We didn't pay for any of that piping or any of the other stuff or anything to do with that.
Mayor,
There's a,
I'll call point
it's
of
okay.
order, I'll call the question.
So, any other questions?
Mayor, I'll call
You
the question.
You want to end?
I think we've covered,
Is there anything pertaining to this presentation?
Yeah, the rest of this is not on.
I mean, Mrs. Noonan's question had nothing to do with the presentation.
Uh-huh.
Who pays for this has nothing to do with the presentation.
I go back,
Those
Jake
are all
Cooley,
questions we gotta answer.
I go back to my original remark. In her presentation, you mentioned that there is no compromise to the dam so far, based on this. And my question was, why wasn't there inspection done before the drilling took place by the TCEQ?
TCEQ, I'll answer this. TCEQ did not look for or identify us as a holder of water. What they've done, and I'll have the attorney make sure I'm saying this right, in the past, now that we're in a drought, they've started taking aerials, and those aerials they've gone after golf courses and enforcement actions for holding water. Dow Worthington has not been identified as somebody that was illegal, or in theory, they thought was illegally holding water. We've had this structure forever. But because of the issue of them coming out, now they've identified us physically by saying, hey, you got a problem with a dam. So that's how we got to where we are. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Ingrid Cooley, 3016 California Lane. So, help me understand, you're mentioning the height and all that, and the spillage, 6 feet or whatever you said. That's assuming we have a, at some distance, correct?
Yes, it assumes that it starts at the spillway, the current spillway crest elevation, and that we have a flood event occur and the water level goes up from there.
Okay, because I think we've never ever been near that, have we? Ever. So my question is, I mean, I know we're thinking of the 500 or whatever, but so if we've never been near that level of the water height or level, whatever you want to call it, and now we're way down, are we ever going to get any water? Like, I mean, it just
doesn't
seems...
really matter. The structure and the
doesn't
enforcement actions of what it is what it is. If we can raise the spillway, it raises the amount of height and requirements that we have to have in order to have a certain level. Those are issues that we have to figure out how to address. I understand that the spillway's been lowered, but if we raise the spillway, we are also going to have to raise the height. Now it's under the current analysis of where it's at right now, Ms. Newton. And I understand, I truly understand. Where it's at right now, this is what the requirement is. If we want to raise that, which in theory we could, if we raise that spillway another 2 feet, 3 feet, whatever it is, that would increase the height of what we have to do with the rest of the dam structure, and that will increase the amount of money from the estimate.
Does the
Does that make
dam
sense?
extend all the way down to
Better.
this water?
I'm trying to give explanations first, so
Well,
it's
why
okay.
don't you give them an explanation on your own time?
Any other questions?
Well,
We were here at 7:30.
I don't think that was very.
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Well, he's called for the question.
I know, but we do have some questions.
I'm trying.
I know you
trying to take care
are.
of
I
it.
know
Is there
you
anybody
are.
else
I
that
know
has
you are.
any other questions directed towards the presentation? Yes, sir.
Caleb Baldwin, 330 I was just curious, if we could wait until we had a permit before we were able to do like engineering studies for possible solutions, or if we could go ahead and start that process. And then a secondary question to that is, you know, we kind of talked about like already potential options. If you did turn it into a spillover dam, would you still have to raise the elevation?
No.
Okay. So when do you think we might actually be able to explore options?
I think that's going to be once we go through the process of figuring out the enforcement action, and then we have to come up with then solutions. Right now, we go through the TCQ permit process. We get the permit and go through the process, which takes 18 to 24 months.
I can't guarantee.
Yeah, is what we're
Over a
estimating.
year, though. Right
Yes,
there.
sir. I mean, this is not a quick solve solution or anything else. Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to extend this any further, but doesn't the TCEQ require us to tell them what we're gonna do, what the improvements we're gonna make to the dam before we can get a permit?
For the water, right?
Is the permit just for water
It's
rights
illegal.
or for, okay.
He's
I was
asking
wrong.
what
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know.
it's just for riparian rights?
I'm directing that towards my attorney.
Yeah.
Because
I'll answer File the application for the water rights. You have to tell them what the dam is. Ultimately, we need to tell them that. That said, the application process takes a long time, so we may be doing studies, to look at which alternative the city wants to go with to fix the dam. Okay? And if we come up with something different, we'll pull what we gave them when we filed and replace it with what they found. Before you get the permit, the answer is no.
Okay, no, but we can be working towards a solution as we're trying to get the permit.
Yes.
Okay.
So a proposed solution doesn't have to come with the application of the permit?
You'll have it with the application, but you won't spend the dollars to build it until you get the permit.
Understood, but we had to do a study for an engineer's plan, a civil engineer's plan, to have a solution, right?
or could it just be
Or maybe that's a good question for Priest and Nichols. I mean,
The application's set up to file as is right now. With the dam as it is right now. So we're gonna make alterations, we'll just change that out.
so it wouldn't be automatically denied because we're not compliant? Okay. Pardon?
Two separate units.
Any other questions?
They don't care if we
Yes,
kill
no?
people. They doesn't care if we steal
Done?
somebody else's water.
Anybody else?